We are back in the garage and we are working on the 59 Galaxie again. A little bit's changed since the last time you saw it. The big thing is we just wire brushed the floors. So nothing crazy. We tried putting a camera in here and all you saw was a dust cloud. So not gonna make you sit through that. Hopefully we can find some better camera angles than the last episode. This time we are doing everyone's favorite thing, which is rust repair. Not really. As solid as this car is, there are still a few spots. It's 66 years old. It was a daily driver. It wasn't like a trailer queen or anything like that it would be considered now. This was driven in the winter. If you've ever wondered what people did back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when it snowed, they drove stuff like this. Didn't matter the fact that it had a 300 horsepower V8. It didn't matter that it was rear-wheel drive or weighed a ton or was 30 feet long on super skinny tires or had drum brakes at all four corners. This is what they drove. As such, there's some little minor rust spots. Again, I can't stress enough how solid this car is. It's 66 years old, and if that wasn't bad enough, it also had to sit through a flood, or in a flood. So overall, the floors are actually really good, but there are a few places that need fixed. We've marked them with gray primer, but here are a few of those spots. I think if you actually look close, you can probably see daylight or, the concrete floor through the holes, but that's what we have to fix. Just little things like that. There's no giant holes, but it is there. We are going to have to fix it. Now, I'm going to make it very clear, I am not a professional body worker. I don't even pretend to be one. I'm not a professional welder. This is solely to protect the car, protect the interior, and make sure it's waterproof. We don't want it to keep rusting. We want to try and stop at least what we can, and the best way to do that is to cut out some of the bad spots. So, with that being said, we're going to start making some patch panels and welding them in. So we've got a few holes here. We've got the bigger hole in the spare tire well, and then a couple others that we tried welding that just didn't. So those are going to get patch panels, and not what I wanted to do, but it's what we're going to have to do. The good news is for you, we're going to cue the time-lapse music, and you're not the one that has to sit here and do it. places cut out aside from the one in the spare tire well. Most of them aren't going to be too bad. We have a few that are on some strengthening ribs that are stamped into the trunk floor. That's going to be a little bit harder to shape, but not terrible, I don't think. There is one that's going to be a little tricky, and that's this one right here. As you can see, it's missing a little bit. It's lighter than carbon fiber. And that's because not only is it on the corner, but it is right above one of the body mounts. Interestingly enough, that body mount is a little bit rusted. Again, this was driven in the snow and the rain and everything like that. So it's to be expected, and we knew that that body mount was bad. Never put two and two together that the floor on top was bad of the body mount. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this part up here, and then once that's done, we're actually going to crawl underneath, and we're actually going to plate the body mount. It's in a really kind of tricky spot to cut out and replace with a direct copy. So by plating it, we're going to leave what's there. We're going to hit it with some rust converter to make sure that it's not going to rust anymore, and then plate it with some steel, and it should be as good or stronger than what it was before. Now that we got the trunk patch panels all cut out, we're going to start working on the inside. There's a few pieces here that we'll need to fix. While I'm doing that, Adam's going to be cutting out the replacement sheet metal, and we're going to hopefully get this done fairly quick. the Galaxie. It's a few days later, so it's only me working in the shop. Before Adam left, he was able to get most of the patch panels made. Today, what we're going to try and do is finish welding them in. Most of them are welded in. There's a few kind of tricky ones that we're going to have to make that may be multiple pieces welded together. I don't really know. And once we finish that, we're going to tackle the big hole in the spare tire well and maybe see what other options that we have other than actually making a patch panel just because of the crazy shape. Alright, got it rough cut. Let's get to bending, and then we'll bend it to the shape of the spare tire well as much as we can, and we'll trace around it, and then we'll cut that to size. by the videographer who shall not be named and should probably be fired, there's not a lot of video of the last welding in of the patch panels. The videographer will be dealt with accordingly. But that's it. We're done with the interior rust repair. The next thing that we're going to do is actually mask off everything we don't want painted on the inside, and we're going to paint the inside black. We've got some Rust-Oleum tractor paint. It's not going to be cosmetic. That's not what we're going for here. There's going to be carpet, there's going to be full interior, even a headliner. What we are going for, though, is the protection. We want to make sure it stays nice and protected, and should any water get in, I mean, it is an old car, we're going to put new seals and everything, but it still happens. We want to make sure that we don't immediately have more rust holes. The best way to do that was some sort of a coating, so we're going to paint it. It won't be tonight because it's pretty late, but the next step is going to be to mask off the inside, get this painted, so that's what you're going to see next. So in case you're wondering how many cans of spray paint it takes to paint the inside of a 1959 Ford Galaxie, it's more than 4. You want to know how many I bought? It was 4. Yeah. That's going to be a trip to the store. Well, that's it for this episode. Got some good news and bad news. The good news is it's done. Not the car, clearly. But painting the inside. We got a nice coat of paint on the inside to help protect it. The bad news is that the video of the last bit of the time lapse that was really going to kind of finish things off, it got corrupted, so unfortunately I don't have that. But you can see the floor plans look great. And like I said, the biggest thing is that they're nice and protected. Well, like I said, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed watching these videos, feel free to subscribe so you can follow along with all the future videos. I'm going to try and keep putting them out for anyone that wants to watch. If you missed the first video, I'll link to it at the end. Until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. sneak peek for next time.